Well, that game tonight actually got pretty entertaining. Aside from a couple different things, first of all, Jalen Hurts all of a sudden is atrocious at football. I mean, this guy, like, there's always been speculation with Jalen Hurts, right? Like, can he throw if he's being tasked to do that? And I always thought the criticism of Jalen Hurts sometimes went a little too far. I didn't think he was that bad, but dear God. I mean, he threw 4 interceptions tonight. And of course, in one of my leagues, I had the combination of not only Jalen Hurts tonight, I also had Ladd McConkey on one of my teams. And it's that team that I've been really just upset about the entire last week or so, that it's my only league that has week 14 playoff start. And I lost Christian McCaffrey this week because he's on a bye. And simultaneously, I needed Jalen Hurts and Ladd McConkey to combine to give me like 30 points, and they both got like 2 points combined. Like, that was the type of night it was for me personally. So lots of fun from that perspective. I'm curious how many other people had the Ladd McConkey and the freaking Jalen Hurts stack tonight, because that was abysmal. But you guys know what you're here for, not to hear me talk about what happened in my own fantasy leagues. And I actually advanced in 22.6% of my best ball leagues. I'm officially advancing in. You would be hard-pressed to find anyone with a better advancement rate than that. But of course, tonight is not about that. Tonight is about what I got right and what I got wrong, and I do this after every week. It just gets more important that we do this now with the playoffs coming up here. So I hope you advanced. If you did not advance, I hope you had fun playing and time to not get last place, basically. But if you are there, let's get ready to make sure we win some championships. And I think that needs to be part of the theme here tonight is, being right and wrong is something that everybody experiences throughout their life. It's on you to get transparent about it. That's why I do it. And it gets more important this time of the year. So we'll start out with something I got right. I think that a lot of times, like, when things get dicey, people get really worried about, like, what's the ripple effect? And particularly when it comes into weather games, right? Like if you've got a weather game where it's going to be really, really rainy or really, really snowy or really, really windy, people are always like, well, did you check the weather report in this game? It looks rough. And I'll be honest, like most of the time that does affect things. Like, you've got a quarterback like Jacoby Brissett, for example, who I actually think has a strong arm, but isn't the level of quarterback of like a Josh Allen and a Joe Burrow. If you put him in that weather game yesterday, I don't think he would have done as well because he's not the level of quarterback that those guys are, and he's also not used to throwing that weather because he's a Cardinal and he plays in a dome. You put a guy like, Tyler Shugg out there, or you put somebody like Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, it's like, it's not going to go very well. So I would say actually for the majority of teams out there, they have quarterbacks who aren't good enough to pierce it through the wind or pierce it through the snow or the rain. But I got a lot of questions leading up to this Cincinnati Bengals and Buffalo Bills game about weather and how it impacts not only the receivers for the game, but how it impacts the quarterbacks. And I said, to your surprise, none at all. Because what you have to do is just look at the history of these two guys, right? Where do they both come from? Well, they both come from areas where this kind of weather happens. Cincinnati, it doesn't see the extent of what Buffalo does, but Cincinnati's a windy, Cincinnati is a cold weather area where it gets snow. Buffalo, obviously, it's the same thing. So I said, both of these two quarterbacks, they're strong arm guys who have proven time and time again throughout their entirety of their careers, they can do this in this type of weather. So I said, it's not going to affect either of them. And they were both, I think, my top 2 quarterbacks on the week. And so people thought it was a little nuts. And then the T. Higgins thing, freaked people out. And I kept saying to people, guys, these are good plays to make. And not only was the Bengals-Bills game one of the most entertaining games of the year, if you actually didn't watch it, you should. Because that game was a lot of fun to watch, man. We had so many great fantasy performances, namely from T. Higgins, namely from Josh Allen. So I think what people need to realize is that, yes, I think the rule should be if there's a bad weather game, right? Like if it's going to be snowy, if it's going to be windy, if it's going to be rainy, you should think about those things and how it could impact the team's passing game. However, there are exceptions to the rule. And I would say that Joe Burrow and Cincinnati's offense, they're an exception to the rule. Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen, they're an exception to the rule. Patrick Mahomes, his offense, that's an exception to the rule because those quarterbacks are used to playing in this kind of weather. Jordan Love, Green Bay's offense, they're an exception to the rule as well. They're used to, look at what they just went through the other night. They played in like 14-degree weather. Felt like 7 degrees with the wind chill in Green Bay. And they still sliced up Chicago's secondary. So there's exceptions to the rule as well. And I think that I do a good job of identifying those because it just comes down to logical thinking, right? It just comes down to, well, where does this team usually play? What conditions do they usually play in? Do they play in a dome? And if none of those answers are equaling a problem, then you shouldn't look at it as a problem. So that was one that I got right. But here's one that I got wrong. And I will say that this one in particular is atrocious. I mean, this one in particular, this whole team, I think I'm very guilty of this as well. And I still believe in Jaden Daniels. But I think so many people, including myself once again, just gave the Commanders as a team the green light moving forward as a franchise. And I'm talking about both offensively and defensively, right? So the Commanders, they had like a really busy offseason. They traded for a lot of veteran players. They got Laramie Tunsil on the offensive line from Houston. They got Deebo Samuel. They have a, 35-year-old Bobby Wagner still in the middle of the defense. Like they have so many old guys on that team. And I do remember thinking at one point in the offseason, I wonder if this could go bad. But I kind of brushed it off because I was like, Jaden Daniels is a star. So I wasn't really that worried about it from that perspective because I was just like, you know what? I don't think it's going to go that bad because Jaden Daniels is just too good. And so looking at it this week, they had an opponent that they were going to play that had no life offensively. Minnesota had absolutely no life. And they had a star wide receiver who looks increasingly frustrated as the weeks go by. Their running back is injured. The rest of their receiving core is just frustrated as well. Like there was no life in Minnesota prior to this week. And so when I was ranking defenses, I was like, I don't see how this is a bad play. I do not see a world where the Commanders are a bad play against a team like Minnesota. And it's not like the Commanders have done good at all. We all know they're having a really bad season this year. But the Commanders, 34-0 was the outcome of that game. So long story short, they did not come up as a good defensive play in that game. And I think that there's a lot to kind of uncover with this Commanders unit, man. And we'll talk more about the Commanders later, but I just kind of want to stick with what I'm trying to tell you guys, which is I was so wrong on this one because when you've got a bad team like the Commanders, and they're bad, going to play another bad team, maybe it's not as good as it looks. And I think a good example of that to juxtapose with is the Browns versus the Titans this past week. The Browns just lost to the Titans, and the Titans put up 30-plus points on them. And you came out thinking, like, before the game started, the Browns defense, like, they're really good. They're going to crush Cam Ward. And I, again, thought the same thing. But you've got a bad team facing another bad team. Anything can happen. And so that's just something that I need to take into account moving forward with the Commanders' defense because, that defense was thoroughly embarrassed. They got undressed by Minnesota's offense, who hadn't done anything against anybody in a long time. So what an embarrassment from Washington, and what an embarrassment by me for ranking them in my top 12. Here's something I got right, though. I did, there's certain weeks with certain players that just kind of call for a statement ranking. And what I mean when I say that to you guys is that I have when I do my rankings every single week, like if we've got like a high upside guy, like Jonathan Taylor's a good example right now because he's about to go through a really rough patch, and he may be bad the rest of the year in fantasy without Daniel Jones, right? So, but the problem with me ranking him as like RB2 moving forward is that he's already shown such an enormous ceiling and the ability to hit these home run hits that it's like it feels a little disingenuous for me to put him too low. So I've got to make a statement by putting him lower because I see lower outcomes in the future, but I can't put him too much lower because I don't want this to indicate to anybody that you should be benching Jonathan Taylor if you have him, right? So that's what I mean when I say, like, I'm making a statement ranking on a player. So this week, I came out and I said, you guys know I love Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice is one of my favorite receivers in the NFL. I think he's a great player, and he's been really highly ranked throughout the entirety of the season for me. And he's earned it. I mean, it's not like I'm just doing it just because I like the guy. You know, he's earned every bit of his ranking, being a top 5 wide receiver every week in my rankings. But this past week, I did put him, I think, at like wide receiver 9, and I said, guys, this is a statement ranking right here because he's playing in Houston against the, not in Houston, but against the Houston Texans defense, and Derek Stingley is his matchup. This will not go very good for Rashee Rice. And not only did it not go good for him last night, but I think the kind of the play that represented his night best was when he got blown up. I think it was by Jalen Petrie, the Texans safety. I mean, he was catching a ball and then he just got obliterated. And it looked like he got in a car crash, ironically. So, you know, him doing what he did last night didn't surprise me at all. But, you know, I struggle to kind of say I was super right on this one also because it's not like I told people to bench him. And that would have been a wise move considering the outcome of the game. But realistically, much like Jonathan Taylor, I'm not going to tell you guys like in any week to bench a guy like Rashee Rice or Jonathan Taylor or a guy like, you know, a guy like Bijan Robinson who had a bad week. Guys like that where it's like, you know the ceiling's enormous, and they can hit it in any given week, and they have hit it several times. That's the difference between those types of guys versus a Justin Jefferson type of guy, right? Like, you know what I'm saying. Justin Jefferson hasn't hit a 20-point ceiling but one time this year, and it was like 2 months ago. So I feel a lot more comfort benching a guy like Justin Jefferson compared to like a Jonathan Taylor or Rashee Rice. But my point is that like there has to be like statement rankings for this reason. Like when it comes to matchup, like there are certain guys that, especially at the receiver position, if you're in a bad matchup, like that's gonna really hurt. And he's not a Jamar Chase. He's not a Justin Jefferson. He's not a Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's not a Puka Nacua to where you can kind of disregard matchup. Like Rashee Rice is great, but a lot of his fantasy greatness comes from hyper target and just from the fact that he's their clear best wide receiver in the room. But that doesn't work against every opponent. So that one I did have kind of like really, really figured out from the beginning of the week. Here's something I got wrong. So this one's funny to me, and I'm laughing because of the meme that I'm sure everyone's going to know what I'm talking about when I say who I'm talking about. I just want to make it clear before I get into this one. I don't like Shedeur Sanders is not a guy that I'll be honest, like he's not someone I actively root for. Like I find him annoying, but I've always said this, like when it comes to like how I feel about a specific player, none of my personal feelings go into ranking these guys, right? So I got asked a lot heading into this week. Surprisingly so. Like, how many people ask me, is Shedeur Sanders a good start this week? Like, I don't know if he's a good start or not. And I kept saying to people, you know, I just think that it's a little premature for me to call Shedeur Sanders like a solid start. Like, if we were talking about like the Shedeur Sanders in his first 2 games, he was like a a 20-point quarterback. Like, he had a 15-point game, that he had like a 19-point game. I would say, okay, natural progression says that he's getting better, and maybe it is the time to start him over a Lamar Jackson type. But I got asked a lot of questions about like Shedeur Sanders versus like, Lamar Jackson, or Shedeur Sanders versus like a Jacoby Brissett, or Shedeur Sanders in place of a Drake May on a bye week or a Jackson Dart on a bye week. And I kept telling people, it's just too premature for me. Like, I am not ready to say that Shedeur Sanders should be a guy that should be played. And the joke's on me, because Shedeur Sanders was, I think, the quarterback 2 on the week. And here's the thing that kind of gets me on this one, is that, number one, the matchup in theory was really good, right? Like, the Tennessee matchup, that should have been a good one from the get-go. The other thing that gets me, though, is that with Shedeur, I've kind of said this over the several weeks that he's been starting, he clearly is better than Dillon Gabriel. Like, it's actually not particularly close. There is like an element of Shedeur that he's a cowboy. Like, he's this wild chance taker. He, extends plays, and he just has a bigger arm to make bigger throws down the field than Dillon Gabriel ever could. Like, Dillon Gabriel, you knew what you were getting with Cleveland's offense, which was no mistakes, and he was going to methodically move the ball like inch by inch down the field, which is so boring to watch, and there's not much fantasy upside in that. But from a team perspective, like, I kind of understood why the Browns weren't going with Shedeur Sanders, because it's like, you've got this dominant defense. You want to minimize mistakes. Like, Shedeur Sanders is just a more mistake-prone guy. But for fantasy football, it's not close. Like, Shedeur Sanders is a much better quarterback for fantasy football, for himself and for others, than Dillon Gabriel ever was. So it is kind of frustrating kind of looking at that and being like, what? Like, the writing's been on the wall. Like, I've seen him make these bigger throws than Dillon Gabriel couldn't make, and I still was just kind of like burying my head in the sand and saying, like, he's not a good play. So yeah, it's interesting, man. But yeah, I did find it fascinating. I don't know who saw the meme of Shedeur Sanders over the weekend. It's really weird. I don't know if it's true. I don't know what the deal is. I couldn't find video of it, but it was weird. But I mean, one thing's for sure, Shedeur Sanders has definitely entered into the possible start category. I'm not sure where he'll be ranked this week. I don't know who the Browns are playing yet. I haven't looked deep enough into Week 15 yet. But as soon as I'm done here tonight, I'll probably do start doing some more deeper rankings. But yeah, Shedeur Sanders, man, I got that one pretty wrong. Here's one I did get right. Kind of going back to that Texans and Chiefs game. I said this weeks ago. There's 3 elite defenses in the league. And actually, at this point, I'm kind of considering just making it exclusive for 2 defenses now. Because it's clear to me, the Broncos and the Texans, the Seahawks and the Texans, like, they are in such a unique class where they have just this unbelievable unit, top to bottom, that you can't pick holes in. And I think the Broncos are that. I'm still not ready to push the Broncos out. So I would still say the Broncos are an elite unit as well. But there's 3 elite defenses. And we're at the point in the fantasy season where you kind of just have to trust the best, right? And we've seen massive performances from the Seahawks, from the Broncos, and from the Texans in fantasy. And so this past week, I had the Texans in my top 10 as a defensive play against the Chiefs, who were desperate, right? The desperate Chiefs versus the Houston Texans. And it was on Sunday Night Football in Kansas City. And so a lot of people were wondering, well, we've never just, and I get this one, because like, we haven't seen the Chiefs be this bad yet. Like, this is a first for all of us, because with Patrick Mahomes, all the Chiefs have done is make it to, at the very least, AFC Conference Championship games. So watching the Chiefs this year is like a foreign feeling. It almost doesn't feel real. So like, heading into this game, which is a must win for the Chiefs, a lot of people were like, why do you have the Texans defense here? And why don't you have Mahomes ranked higher? Because I think that the Chiefs are just going to overpower them in a must-win scenario. And I said, that could be the case, but I'm just telling you what I've seen. When I combine a couple different factors, which is that the Texans have done excellent against quarterbacks this year, and they've just been such a stout defense from top to bottom, and they put together so many good fantasy performances. When I combine that with the Chiefs offense, their capability of making turnovers, their drops, which have not been just a problem on Sunday night, they've been a problem a lot of this year. I'm combining all those things, and I'm going to say that the Texans have to be inside the top 10. And they were exactly that. They forced several turnovers off of Mahomes, and they held the Chiefs to 10 points, I think. Like, we just have to come to grips with this. When it comes to these three defenses, the Seahawks, the Texans, and the Broncos, they will find themselves, 95% chance, all three of those defenses find themselves in my top 12 for the rest of the season. Because they're too good not to be there. Because a matchup is going to matchups are going to get dictated by the defense in these scenarios, right? Like, you have a fringe defense. Let's say the Minnesota Vikings, for example. Like, I've been saying for a long time on a soapbox by myself that the Vikings are a solid defense, actually. But their problem is their offense is so bad. You get a fringe defense like that, matchup really matters. Because, like, if you put them in front of the Los Angeles Rams, who are just clicking offensively, they've got no shot to hold Stafford to a really bad game. But when you get the Broncos against Matt Stafford or the Seahawks against Matt Stafford, yeah, the Seahawks defense and the Broncos defense, they can do pretty friggin' well against them because they're a force of nature colliding with another force of nature, and typically defense is going to rattle an offense. So, yeah, the Texans defense feels like a lock moving forward along with the Seahawks defense. And the Broncos defense is probably the most unstable of the bunch for fantasy purposes. But I could definitely tell you this. The Texans and the Seahawks are the two defenses you want for fantasy football moving forward. And then we'll end on this. Going back to that Commanders and Vikings game, I want to get deeper into Washington. So, first of all, I had Terry McLaurin ranked as a top 10 wide receiver this week. Obviously, that does not turn out. And I want to just jump right past that. Not that I'm like trying to avoid taking responsibility. I want to get deeper into this and why I'm like annoyed with myself being wrong on this one. Because again, Jaden Daniels, I crown this guy like he's a stud. He's possibly the best young quarterback in the league under 25. Like I love everything about Jaden Daniels after his rookie year. And like I said earlier, I still love Jaden Daniels. Like I still view him as the future of the league. I still view him as the future of Washington. It's just been a bad year. And that's the thing with this one this week. Ranking Terry at number 10 was such an ill-advised move on my part because there's so many things that could have gone wrong that did go wrong in this game that were so identifiable. So number one, Minnesota's defense, as I had been saying, is really good. Like, if you put Minnesota's defense with a mediocre offense, give them the Texans' offense, that defense is going to win games for you. Like, they're not as good as the Texans. They're not as good as the Seahawks. They're not as good as the Broncos, but they're like a tier below them. But they've looked bad this year because of that offense. So that was an identifiable factor. Number two was that, Jaden Daniels, as much as I love him, this is a lost season for him. I mean, the guy went down with the injury again yesterday. It's like you just kind of, at some point, you just kind of have to say to yourself, man, like it's just time to acknowledge that it's not going to work. Like you can't get injured 4 times in the same season and then come back and be like, oh, yeah, the guy's dominant again, right? Like that just doesn't happen for most players. Like Joe Burrow's kind of the exception where he comes back after the severe turf toe and he immediately looks like all-pro Joe Burrow again. I mean, look at Lamar. Lamar Jackson is an all-pro player who has not been the same since coming back from the injury. So watching Jaden Daniels struggle in his second year, even when healthy, is not surprising because second-year quarterbacks typically are not the best investments to make. So Terry McLaurin, like ranking him at 10th wide receiver overall for me this week is so bad. Like it was such a bad move on my part. It was so many identifiable things that could have gone wrong heading into the week against Minnesota that I could have identified, but all of them went wrong, and I'd still rank Terry as the wide receiver 10. Bad ranking right there. That was what I got right and wrong. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support if you like this segment, and we'll answer Alias' super chat and then get out of here. Good to see you in here. How you feel about the backfield between Vidal and Hampton, and Shedeur specifically compared to Knicks? Browns versus Bears and Broncos versus Packers next week. So we'll answer the Chargers backfield since I just watched that game tonight. I still think that Hampton is going to get the bulk of the carries. When you watch Vidal, outside of the one play at the beginning of the game where he got like a 60-yard catch and run, Vidal was pretty much ineffective, and Hampton was breaking off big runs. Like Hampton's presence was definitely felt, in my opinion, on that offense in his first game back. So I think long-term, Hampton is definitely the guy that you want in this backfield. And I would say that tonight gave me enough confidence to probably play him as an RB2 next week. And when I say RB2, probably without knowing exactly where he's going to be ranked just yet, I would say I'm confident ranking him as like a mid-tier RB2 at the very minimum. Because I do think, like I said, that when you watch tonight's game, it was clear that he was giving this team a lot of burst. So it was something they had been missing for a while. Vidal was so Jekyll and Hyde. And I do think they're going to get that consistency back. Now, is Vidal going to just fade away into oblivion? I don't think so. I think Vidal will have a role. I mean, Harbaugh's been talking him up. They like the guy. So I would imagine that he's going to have a role. To the extent of taking Hampton out of good fantasy value, I don't think so. I think Hampton is going to be a really good addition to playoff teams moving forward. Like I was telling my wife this, like she's got Devon Achane, and as great as he is, he went down with an injury. We don't know the status yet. So like I was telling her, this is why we held on to Amari and Hampton for so long. Like we wanted him to come back and potentially replace somebody. This is kind of the scenario I'm talking about here. So, we might be replacing Devon Achane with Amari and Hampton at least for 1 week. We'll see if that comes to pass. But my point being is that Hampton, I do believe, showed me enough tonight to kind of believe pretty strongly that he'll be their lead back moving forward. Once again, I don't think Hampton is going to just completely push away Kamani Vidal, but considering it's a run-first team, considering that he looked better than Vidal tonight, I do think Vidal, his role is going to definitely shrink. And then these two quarterbacks this week, looking at it on the surface, I would say Shedeur is probably my favorite play, like between the two. My thing with Bo, I've got the same exact, not the same exact scenario, but I have Jordan Love and I have Bo Nix on the same dynasty team, and it'll be our first week of the playoffs next week. I'm going to play Jordan Love. Like, I am not even thinking about playing Bo Nix. I want nothing to do with Bo in this matchup. And it's crazy because I said this last week as well. The crazy part with Bo is that he's been so he's been so all over the place this whole year from a fantasy perspective. But the thing with and what Jordan Love has as well. But the thing with Jordan Love is you can kind of identify when he's going to be good. Like Jordan Love, he's the type of guy that when the matchup is in the green and he's playing a weak pass defense, Jordan Love can go off. And he usually does. But when he's playing a red pass defense that's really good, that's when he's usually pretty bad. So he's easy to predict than Bo Nix. Bo Nix can go up against a really bad pass defense and put up a 25-point game. He's done it several times this year. So it's kind of hard to bench Bo over a guy like Shedeur still for me. But, I just think about Shedeur Sanders. The big playability is there. it started to click with Harold Fannin and Jerry Jeudy this past week. And Chicago's pass defense is weak, and it's getting even weaker if you believe it or not. Like, that secondary is still taking hits from an injury perspective. So the Bears' pass defense, man, there's a lot of weaknesses there. And I really do think that it's one of those scenarios where, as of now, Shedeur Sanders and Bo probably be pretty closely ranked, I would imagine, this week. But I'm leaning towards Shedeur this week. Appreciate the super chat, man. And good to see everybody in here. Twisted Folk, it's good to see you, man. I'm glad to know that everything is going good for you. And let's just enjoy ourselves. It's fantasy playoff week 1. Let's go, baby. Like the video, subscribe to the channel on your way out. Join FS Roundup on your way out, too. Start sit polls are going live here in another 30 minutes or so for week 15. And you can get access to the automatic waiver tool, the comparison feature, the league sync-up feature, my rankings with the premium subscription. And yeah, we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Love you guys. Have a good rest of your night. Peace out.